I am very happy. I say this at the start of all my podcasts, but I'm changing it. I'm not very excited. I'm very happy to bring you guys an old friend of mine, old in only the sense of the amount of time we've known each other, Nicolette Bernardes, because I've known her since my freshman year in college, and I like to reference her in two ways. If I'm ever talking about her, I will be like, this is when she like really showed up for me. Or if I'm talking about my personal setbacks in love, which I have shared religiously. The first time that I was broken up with was by my ex in my freshman year.
Oh my gosh.
And I, in the dramatic state that I am, I was in our team locker room because we both played volleyball. And I'm just crying, and I'm crying about the fact that my boyfriend got married while we were dating.
Christmas break.
Which is, and I always share that that Nicolette, she held me, she rubbed my back, she soothed me, and then she gave me the comfort of saying, the good news is it can't really get worse than this. Which thankfully I have never been dating someone who got married to someone else while we were dating. So
that.
So that was really probably the first defining moment of my friendship with Nicolette when I was 17 years old. Well, I guess that was at 18, but I met you at 17. Nicolette is a coach as well. I'm going to let her do the introducing of what she does and everything like that. But I'm happy to be interviewing and bringing you Nicolette today. Hello.
Hello. Man, I totally forgot about that. I try to think about like my first memories, like my memories of you. And it was always, I remember how you would hug me and like rest your head on my chest.
No, you can't be taller than me and have a bosom and not expect me to get all like,
I didn't even really have that much of a bosom. She would like mama snuggle me like her mama.
It's just, it's so nice. It's a thing that I just like wish all people could experience. And you know what? It's funny because I was talking to someone one time about like my favorite memories of church. And like, I'm always like, I don't know if this happens in white churches, but in Black churches, like there's always that one kind of like mama that like, if someone has a baby that's like crying or whatever, she'll be like, hand me that baby. And then she just like aggressively gets him or her on her lap and then just like forces the head onto the bosom and then just kind of like rocks. And you're just like, you know, like, and that's honestly, I wish you could hire someone to do that because I would probably invest in that and do it every day. And so like, but being on the volleyball team, being like the third shortest on the team. And I only know that because we lined up as a team
every single day.
But like being able to hug all of you guys and just be like, like it just was, I need.
Oh my gosh. I'm just having these like little flashback moments of like that being your pivotal memory of like your favorite things says so much right there, just about like the love and comfort desired, like just bring me in and hold me close. And then also a little bit of the weird maybe trauma that people carry for being lined up by height for 4 years. That I never thought about because I was always like closer to the taller end.
Yes. Yeah.
But I wasn't the tallest and I wasn't the shortest.
It was like, I think sometimes it annoyed me because I was always like, man, here I am almost at the end because and I have to play front row. I'm very short. We get it. Like, which it still kind of makes me laugh that like on my recruiting visit, I wore like these like pretty much clog type shoes. And they were like this high because I lied on any of my materials. And I said that I was 5'7", when in actuality, I am 5'5", which I want to make clear to everybody is an inch above average for an American woman. So technically I'm tall. However, in the world of volleyball, I was
those rules. Yeah, those rules just don't apply. Yeah,
I was short. So yeah, we've known each other. I'm bad at math, so that was 17. I am 35. So 37,
18.
so 20. Thank you.
18 years.
I was getting there. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
We have known each other now for the equivalent of the amount of time that I did not know you.
Yes. That's always weird when you hit that crossover point because, and I think about, it's been a while. I was just saying when we first got on the video, it's been a while since you and I have actually talked. It's probably been about 2 years or so.
It has been a while.
But, you're probably the person I stayed in contact with the most over the years and have these pretty pivotal, both for me and for you, kind of memory points. Like my first tattoo, this would be Sarah's handwriting.
There it is. I love it. And I like that we have like tattoos in the same place too. We're like little soul sisters. And then look at us. We're doing like similar things too. You probably do it more lovingly than I do, but
well, it depends on how you define love, but we can get into that.
Yes, we
or
can.
Loving, how you define lovingly.
Yeah, this is true. I have a friend who just adopted a puppy, and I've been trying to be respectful of how he like brings the puppy into like socialization and blah, blah, blah. And I was talking to my friend. I was like, I don't think he wants me to meet my dogs, which granted my one is the size of me, but still. And I was like, I mean, I know I'm probably not the person to like I have to ask for advice on this because I'm very much trial by fire. Like I'll just throw my dog into like a ring of dogs, be like, figure it out, you got it. And like come to me if you need me, but also don't, so I'm lovingly is not quite my middle name, but it is in a way. So yes. Let's start with, what do you do?
Oh man, I really actually kind of hate this question, but because it has changed so much as I change. Mm-hmm. But the best way, like, to give the overarching what I do is I create space and I hold space. What falls underneath that is what used to be what looked like traditional coaching, but it's really evolved into more. I have a couple different services that I offer when I work with clients, but it's all around bringing people back into their bodies to help them attune to where they're holding not just physical tension, but emotional like tension in their body, and that they may not be aware of, that is keeping them sort of trapped in their physiology, which then manifests itself. Their emotions are trapped, their spirit is trapped, they feel very disconnected because they have left the building just to keep going in life. So the work that I do is centered around bringing people back into themselves, helping them touch into feeling, like period, but also feeling the where they are holding things in their body, helping them to reduce some of the stress in that through like a physical release technique, so they have more emotional space to do the work that they're trying to do. And but really it's about inviting people to come back to themselves so that they can start to listen to the truth as it relates to their life, because we all have different truths, we all have different paths. And so my role is really to create a really safe container for people to put down the armor, let the walls down a little bit, and know that everything is okay for them to feel or experience whatever shows up with no judgment, so that they can start to process and move that energy to liberate themselves, to seal up the energetic leaks that keep them exhausted and stressed out and striving and running in circles. So how that shows itself like in an actual like practice is I do a table work that I call release and reconnect, that has to do with physical activation points, intuitive guidance, asking questions, guiding people through breath and vibrations and imagery and questions to help do all of that. I also have just started doing something called experiential astrology, which is working with the astrological wheel in a circle on the floor, that allows people to step into this sacred space and allow their body, it's an embodiment practice, to guide them to certain aspects of the wheel which then ultimately allows them to work with certain archetypes within their psyche and stepping towards that and allowing whatever to show up. But it's all around getting out of the head, getting into the body, and getting to know ourselves better. Does that make sense-ish?
I'm a little lost on the astrological stuff.
Yeah, it's a longer explanation but ask any questions that you have.
Well, because I do know that like I'm always lost when it comes to astrological things.
It's a lot.
And probably much to the dismay of my friends, because somehow I am very much like, I don't know that stuff. I don't know what it means. So like, I don't give a crap. But all like my core group of friends, I will say something and they'll be like, oh, you're such a Capricorn. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. Like, and so I apparently am very much of my astrological self. But yes, I just, since I have people who know what it means, I just don't invest in it, because I'm like, you'll tell me when Mercury's in retrograde, I guess, or whatever. And that's the extent of what I know.
Yeah. I mean, I am a novice in actually being able to read a chart. Like I'm learning, but it's a whole world. And, but what's really powerful about this particular, because I have astrologer friends who give me like the nitty, like really can dive into geek out with me if I need to. So I have resources, but this is, if you think about the 12 signs of the zodiac, we all have all the signs within us. It's like a blueprint essentially of our psyches, similar to the archetypal wheel, like where we all have these archetypes that we all have all of them within us, but only some of them express themselves in our unique form. I am Nicolette, you are Sarah. And so what ends up happening when you get into the wheel and you feel guided towards a certain sign, I will look at a birth chart to see what planets and asteroids, which represent different archetypes. So Mercury is an archetype, Saturn is an archetype, Medusa, Kali, which are asteroids. And there's a bunch of them, and they all represent aspects of your psyche. And whichever ones, it's essentially allowing yourself to guide you to the one that wants to speak today, that wants to show up today, that wants to be worked with today. Gotcha. And then we go on a journey with it in really just engaging with that specific slice of you. And so it's really kind of wild and a little magical in the sense of like, how does it work? There's no real explanation, but it's pretty profound. And what I love about it is that it's an embodiment practice with something like astrology that can get really heady and really confusing, just like you said, like it's a whole ass thing. But it's a gentler way for people to step into themselves and experience aspects of themselves than say getting on the table with me, where I'm actually actively pressing into places where they hold things. And so sometimes it can be it can be a gentler way. And so I use the tools based on what somebody is showing up with and being like, well, what's going to serve you in the highest in this moment? Is it journeying over and over in the wheel, or is it going to be doing a session on the table and then journeying? So It's all around inviting people to trust themselves as to what they need in that moment also, because I don't know what's best for them. I have intuition, but my whole goal is to empower people to make that decision for themselves and learn to honor their yeses and nos, as opposed to what's the right thing to do? What's the right path to take to get to, and get out of that very kind of rigid, outcome-based, performance-based carrot. Out there, and really just be like, what's here right now? What wants to be seen? What's showing itself? Are you fucking pissed off? I hope I can cuss here.
Sure.
I know you don't really cuss, do you?
No.
Forgot about that. Yeah.
I'm a very good Christian girl with my addiction recovery.
Okay. Well, I cuss, so just want to make sure before I go any further there. You can bleep me if you need to. But like, if you're really furious, like be furious. That's there to show you something in this moment. Yeah. Like, and it's all part of this thing we call being human. And I think part of the problem that I see in the world with why people are so sick and why they feel so stuck is that we don't actually allow space for ourselves to feel our feelings fully, because we don't trust we don't know how to contain them to ourselves, to express them, but own them. Instead of all that we know is how to project it out. That's what we're taught, or to stuff it down. And so we stay stuck. And then also there's not enough people to receive. We were just talking about this before we started recording. Like if somebody says I'm depressed, or that somebody's crying, even, it's like, oh, what's wrong? Like, or like you get that like,
yeah,
oh God, that got too heavy. Well, why? Yeah. Like, you're a human. That's part of being human. Can we accept that? Can we give space for that?
So like one of the reasons why I was looking forward to reaching out to you to see if you would be on my podcast is because I know that we do similar things. And like, it almost kind of sounds like I help people become aware that they need to do some stuff. And then you physically allow them to get into themselves to feel it, right? I can only talk them through it and give them exercises about how they can get more into themselves. But it's, you do more of the physical aspect of it so that they can do the type of work that where I'm like, do these exercises or blah, 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 whatever. And it's funny because before I hit record, I had even said, oh, like soft space, and you're like safe space. And so what I do like is that you talked about the whole truths things, right? Truth, you know what I'm saying? And I already see that show up because like, so I know, and I come from the space of like, as I mean, I'll take like obviously the most obvious thing, like as a Black woman, safe space for me just looks like I know I'm somewhere where no one's going to like call me any names or expect me to be a certain way or whatever. Soft space for me looks different, where then I have someone who is like, yeah, I have like, like you can just cry, you can like show up however you want, and like I fully receive it, and like how can I show up for you, right? And it's exactly what you were saying, because when you were describing it, I'm like, that's literally soft space, that's crazy, right? Like, because it is that idea of taking off your armor, and that's what I say to my clients and with myself. It's and it's funny because the instinct that many people would want to have is, well, that's not soft space, that's not safe space, that's soft space, right? Like we want to counter things. And what you describe is, I like, for me, I'm like, well, as like a Black woman, I have to go deeper, right? Because like a safe space for me will sometimes look like, where if I'm like, oh, I'm just like really struggling, and this does not happen with my core group of friends, and I'm really thankful for this, but if I'm like, I'm really struggling and I'm just having like a hard time juggling everything, and like people will say, and I know why, but people will say like, you're a strong Black woman, you know, like, and I'm like, yes, no, I know, that's why I'm technically not supposed to say I'm struggling, like, because I am a strong Black woman, like, and Black people are very strong at things, I guess, you know, like, and so for me, like, it's safe because they are like I'm here for you and you're safe to tell me this. But then the softness is if like someone's like, girl, like get in this bosom, you know what I mean? Like, but I love that, like, we have similar things, like the same things pretty much. You do the soft space / safe space a specific way to what works for you and your clients. And then like, I look at it slightly different because like, I come from the truth of like, you know, I'm a Black woman, right? Like, and I'm sure that same, if we gave that same like stuff to a man, it would look different. If we gave it to an Asian man, it would look different than, you know, like, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, like, what it feels like you're describing, it's kind of like both of those things you described are safe spaces, but there's different levels to it. There's levels of depth. It's one thing is like, as if I'm hearing you correctly, it's as you go out just into the world, where is it, excuse me, where is it that you feel like you can settle enough to not have that kind of hypervigilance on about what you're used to dealing with based on the way that you show up in the world, the way you look in the world, versus where are these spaces where you can show more of your inner self?
Yes, because
outward. Yeah.
Yeah. Because like what I have realized is, especially like predominantly working with men, that there's a difference between like hearing them and seeing them, and then there's a difference between being soft with them. And because I think a lot of times people mistake hearing and seeing someone as being soft or allowing softness. And so like, and oh, why are you smiling?
Oh, what came to me there is there's a different depth of how well, let me rewind. What I'm hearing just in that little bit in the kind of subtle difference is I'm listening versus like I am actually open myself to receive and really like not just like hear, but like hear,
Yes,
and witness you without needing you to be something different than whatever you were showing up as in this moment.
exactly. Because like, I mean,
we can hear, but there's a difference in being like, I'm hearing what you're saying and I'm hearing what you're saying.
exactly. It's the very small difference, which is small, but it's huge. We'll take example of like me working with men, right? And like, we'll take basic example of relationships where, a partner may say, hey, like, I want you to be more emotive. I want you to tell me what you're thinking and where you're at. And then the husband, boyfriend, whatever, he is like, okay, sometimes I feel like you don't respect my needs. And then the person's like, okay, I hear you. Thank you. And then if he starts crying while he's describing it, there could be, without even realizing, the knee jerk reaction of like, there's a man crying, like, and so like a slight barrier without even realizing it can come up in someone that vibe will be read by the other person. So like, sure, you're not telling me to like to not cry. Sure, you're like, okay, but like everybody knows that vibe, like it's like, I mean, the biggest set like way I can describe it is like if you are talking to someone and they're all in and then suddenly they just like their vibe changes in their text, every single person knows. They're like, something's off. Like nothing happened, but something's off, right? And so like everybody, like people who are in that space where they're trying to be soft with themselves, they can read that too, for sure. Of like, this person like just changed a little, like the vibe in the room changed. So I just love the fact that not only did you talk about like something pivotal that I do, because I like to believe I provide that soft space for my clients, especially the male clients, because they're trying to figure out how to be soft with themselves at the same time without seeming weak or emasculated or not having the roles that they should as a husband.
I have so much to say about all of this.
I mean, well, and the crappy thing is like, so many people understand it, but also so many people don't know how to change it. And that's why I think like the whole human aspect, being soft, being safe, I always have to remind people, I'm like, I mean, you're human, like, congratulations. You just learned that you're a human person. So guess that happened. Like, like good for you, like,
yeah. So may I go on a bit of a rant here?
Please. I love rants.
Thank you. That's what I do. Like for real. So the first thing that came to me when you're talking, especially about this dynamic between somebody identifies as male and female, like partnerships, right, is a story that Brene Brown tells a lot. I don't know if you've watched her.
I have.
Yeah. So in her the Lake Travis story about her and her husband and their vulnerability moment, but she writes about it in one of her books, and the line after she told the whole story and like she kind of explained how it all unfolded, she says something along the lines of, I'm paraphrasing, like, show me a man who is comfortable, or show me a woman who's comfortable with her vulnerability, And I'll show you a woman who, when her man is in a moment of fear or uncertainty, she doesn't go into fear and uncertainty because she doesn't derive her power from his perceived power. And then show me a man who can hold space for a woman in a moment of, whatever emotional letdown or uncertainty, and doesn't go into like problem solving like mode. And I'll show you a man who's comfortable with his vulnerability and doesn't derive his power from being like Oz.
Yeah.
And so that really framed it out for me. And I like to kind of like shift it into, it's the masculine and the feminine energies, because so much of what you're describing, that subtle shift, it's huge. If you're sensing into your intuition and you feel that, societally, we don't have a lot of space to be like, I had this feeling, like this sense that something's off. Like that gets denied because it's not tangible. It's not measurable. It's not, it is subtle, but it is all energy, and energy is everything. And so much of the work that I do is working with the emotional body and the energies at play that are very subtle, or sometimes they're very freaking intense, and you know it when it's showing up, but sometimes it's so subtle that you don't even realize it until you sometimes look back. Some people never realize it. And so when you talk about helping people like men, as you're describing, to be more open, really more vulnerable with themselves and with their partners and with the world, there is so much around the conditioning that we receive about what makes a man, and what makes a woman, and most of it's bullshit. And so there's the conditioning aspect of it. There's the way in which the world responds to try to push you back into your box. Yeah. And so, but the other piece of it is it always starts with self. And so, for instance, like the example of the Brene Brown-ism that I just described, when a woman goes into, like, she really wants her man to be vulnerable, but if she hasn't done the work to recognize her triggers just around what that means for her sense of safety and security in the world based on the way that she's been conditioned, she may want that in theory, but then being able to receive that and hold space for that means her being in her masculine energy to hold the container of and I'll describe how I perceive the energies in a second. She's more in her masculine in that point, and he allowing him to be in that more feminine emoting space. Yeah. To share without, again, going into like that, oh, he's less of a man. Yes. Because, and then there's also another layer to it where, because we were taught to get our needs met by like tugging at people, the energetic control tug of war. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people use emotional expressions as manipulation, not in a like intentional way, but trying to get a reaction out of somebody or trying to get their way. And so when you're dealing with all these things, it's like two people have to be willing to do their own work to be able to truly meet each other in like their humanity.
I just need to say that it's inappropriate of you to discuss me so aggressively. I don't like that. No, I mean, you're absolutely right.
We all do it though, on some level. Like we have these different control dynamics that we play into based on what we witnessed, based on how we got our needs met as children, mostly, or based on ancestral crap that's been passed along, based on a whole lot of things that are hard, again, to like tangibly understand. So opening ourselves up to the fact there's a lot of crap that like we've been conditioned into, or we have brought into this life to work through, that we have inherited from our ancestors. We don't actually have to know what all of it is. It's just holding space for the fact that like it's a journey that we all agreed to come here and take on some level. And so like giving ourselves the grace and compassion and kindness as we stumble through and like screw it up and then figure it out, like that's the hardest part a lot of times, is getting the judgment of self out of the way so that you can allow yourself to be seen, because that's really at the core what most of us want, is we want to be seen and we want to be known.
Yes. Yeah. Like, so one of the reasons why I kind of got into this space was because I found that I liked asking questions, because I would hear something and like somewhere in my brain, like I think like you may know, because I think I've been describing the inner workings of my brain the same for the past 18 years. It's like little tiny blue men in there, right? Filing things away, whatever. And I always like imagine that when someone says something, like one of the blue guys is just like organizing the mess that's in there. And then he's like, oh, and then like, I'm just like, oh, but like, and so I would hear someone, yeah, like they'd be like, yeah, I hopefully one day I can, write a book. But that's probably a pipe dream. And like, I would immediately be like, I'm just kind of curious, like, why play yourself down before anybody else got the chance to? Like, just curious,
because it's safer. That's the answer.
I know. And so then when I realized that, like, I just always did that, like, it's like, oh, I kind of really like learning these things, because I mean, you met me, when I was just like a brand new little baby in this world, where like,
can I just say, y'all, if you ever want to know if you can survive on, was it Honey Bunches of Oats?
Yes.
This is pretty much all Sarah ate for like a year.
My entire freshman year. Honey Bunch of Oats. I went through multiple boxes and like 2 gallons of milk a week, and it was stupid.
But just in case, if you need to know if like you can actually like full on survive, like you may have some like blood sugar issues by the end of it, but
who even knows?
But but she was a brand new, just sweet little baby.
Have you ever seen What We Do in the Shadows?
Mm-mm.
It's a show about, it's like a comedy about these like vampires that are in modern day Staten Island. And this, the one female vampire, she, cause there's 3 other stars, they're all guys, right? So the one vampire, Naja, she turns this college student into a vampire, and she's like trying to teach her how to become a vampire, and she's like the student is like, oh, should I do this? And she goes, no, come here, you stupid little baby. Like sometimes I think about me when I was younger, and it's just like, I wish I could go back in time and be like, Sarah, you stupid little baby, like, come here. Like, what are you doing? Like, stop doing that. Also,
no, we're gonna be kinder to little Sarah.
I always am thankful for her getting me here, but yes, like sometimes when I think about my younger self, I'm just like, oh,
yeah. We all are on some level, I had the affliction of feeling like I always had to have it all together, and realized I did a pretty good job of like hiding from most people that, like, even for myself, how much wasn't really okay. And I just didn't have a context for how not okay it was, and how much emotional and energetic real estate being worried about like not being good enough, or like getting kind of kicked out of my comfortable little place, and how afraid I actually really was. Like, I didn't even know it, so most people couldn't know it. Yes. And so like I never gave myself the chance to be the little baby deer so much. I was always the one in control.
Yes.
Like, so different sides of the coin.
Well, and the funny thing is, when I do look back at myself over the years, because I was very much against the idea of weakness. Vulnerability was always weakness. I wanted other people to be vulnerable, but like I couldn't do it because it's
show me yours so I know where I stand, but you ain't seeing mine.
Yeah, like because it was just like this is the ultimate form of weakness for me, right? Like and in hindsight, when I do think about myself in the past, I'm like, girl, you were always like, I'm emotionless, but then you're like over in the corner crying. Like I think people know that you have emotions. It's okay,
Yeah.
but I did that for so long where I just thought like, oh, no one knows this about me and I'm tough and blah, blah, blah. But like I was wearing so much on my sleeve already. And it's a really big example to me, I think, of no matter what I said or did, who I truly was at my core would always present itself.
Yeah.
Which there's a level of, and one thing that I talk about with my clients is a lot of like, you have to first recognize who you are, then you have to just accept it and then own it. And if we go back to the lovingly, how we like lovingly show up, right? The big difference for me is, or I shouldn't say the big difference, not from you, but I think the big difference from what I have seen other people talk about, because like one of the biggest issues I had years ago before I started sharing about my depression on Instagram was that I would see people who were like, hey, I'm a mega influencer and I just want to be vulnerable with you guys. I was depressed for a month during the time change and now I'm over it and now I'm great. If I do it, you do too. And I'm like, I just kind of feel like that's like not like like that, like soul crushing depression, like, and so I started sharing about my mental health because I was like, I want people to know, like, this is like decades, like, and it can be, and it also could not be like mine is not yours. But also if mine is like yours, like you're not alone and that's okay, and so like I tried to come or approach it from a very realistic place. And so when I do talk about the idea of like you have to recognize you're just an emotional person. Sometimes you're a little sensitive, even though you're like, I'm the least sensitive person I know. No, you're a little sensitive. Just recognize it and then just like accept it. Like, ugh, I guess this is true. So I guess that's what it is. And then like, how do we own it so we can use it like for a positive instead of letting other people use it against us because we want to try to act like it's not us.
So, okay. So there feels like there's something like a piece of that is, and this is like where maybe like where my work goes, which is like, yes, to what you said, like as part of the journey, but part of it is really like being able to lovingly hold that part of yourself, like the little child that it is.
Yes.
And not just be like, okay. Cause like I do that all the time. I joke about it, like, but part of it is a judgment as if because there's still this underlying piece that says there's something wrong with me because I am this way. That keeps us from being able to fully accept the fact that we all exist. Like there's duality and non-duality. There's binary and non-binary in this existence.
Yeah.
There is a spectrum that we feel this world, but I believe that more people than we would ever really think to quantify are extremely sensitive, not just emotionally sensitive, but energetically sensitive to the world around us. We come out. The reason that birth is so traumatic is because we come from this nice little like cozy, warm, dark space in the womb out into this cluster F of this world, right? And there's, especially if you're born in a hospital, there's fluorescent lights and there's beeping things and there's, all this chaos and people treat it like this emergency. So like we come into this world and are just traumatized from being born into it.
Yeah.
But we are open, like just watching my nephew who's like 19 months old, watching him experience the world. I know you've gone through this with your nephews. You realize like how much human beings actually have the capacity to sense that oftentimes just gets shut down based on the way society perceives vulnerability, perceives emotional expression. I mean, the fact that we tell children to go to school for 6 hours a day and sit still for most of that is like child abuse. Yet we label the kids that want to move as problematic. And it's like, but but we have energy, and like we're not designed to sit still. Like we're designed to move. So, but that becomes a like, be quiet. I want to see you, not hear you. Like, I don't have time for that. I don't want to deal with that. That's bad. Oh, like, oh, something's wrong. Let me fix it for you.
Yeah.
And so all of that starts to armor us up and shut us down from feeling, because part of why I believe being sensitive is a superpower and also can be an extreme challenge is when we don't understand the difference between like where I end and where you begin. Mm-hmm. When you're empathetic to people, when you're an empath of some, if you want to label it that, but if you're just sensitive and attuned and open to the world, like really heart open to the world, it can be really overwhelming. I've gone through that in different levels and iterations. Like I've always been pretty highly sensing, but mm-hmm. I've been extremely guarded. And part of that was to just deal with the overwhelm that comes with the stimulus of this world. Yeah. But as I have intentionally opened, I've had to learn tools to protect myself, not to armor and guard myself, but to say like, I'm not taking on your emotions. I will witness your emotions, because first of all, the most empowering thing I can do for somebody is to give them room to have their own experience. Yeah. Me taking it on for them is me being some sort of martyr, and it actually like makes it about me, not about them anymore. So, but I had to learn in subtle ways. Like when I first started doing body work, I would wake up the next morning with pain in the same places that people I worked on had pain. And I was like, this shit's not mine. Yeah. Yeah. But then it wasn't until I talked to like a mentor who did a lot of energetic body work, where she was like, yeah, you have to intentionally say, like, separate yourself from this energy, because we'll just absorb it. Yeah. And so part of the healing journey is not just acknowledging and accepting that like we're these emotional beings. It's realizing that we do require some practice and in honing of the muscle, just like you would go to the gym to lift, of being able to hold space or just to witness the world, to be present. But then also then when it comes to interacting with people, and I think a lot of people are struggling with this right now, as we've been sort of separated from human beings for so long with the different types of quarantines and everything that have happened, we don't really know, like we were already pretty disconnected to begin with, but now as we enter back into spaces, like let's say for people who, I wouldn't know this because I stopped going out like years ago, because I just don't like large groups of chaos. So like, but people who used to go out a lot, right, to like mm-hmm. bars or crowded restaurants, are maybe noticing after they've been separated from that stimulus for a while, when they walk back into it, it's like overwhelming and draining. Yeah. Part of that is because it's all this different competing energy that if you don't have the tools to hold space for yourself, it can start like, it's like you're getting hit by like 75 different emotions and other people's stuff all at once. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I have to go home. Yeah. Yeah. But that's really like, you know, it depends on how extroverted or introverted you are. But so much of this owning who we are is, and this is where I'm going to take it like to another depth. Please. Talking about masculine and feminine energy and the way the world has, how we've been conditioned to view it. Yeah. You know, people throw around a lot of terms, which I hate, like spewing out the same ones over and over again, but like the patriarchal structures that have essentially been built upon power over dominator consciousness. It says power is finite. I have to take it, or it has to be given to me. And I have to hoard at the top because there's scarcity, and I have to protect my land against those other people over there because mm-hmm. they're coming to get me. It's a very scarce mindset, and it has to do with trying to control other people, taking in order to be safe. And it all comes down to safety and security. But in that transition, however many hundreds, maybe thousands of years ago, this started to happen, was essentially taking these qualities that could be described as the masculine energy. This is a kind of a bastardization of the masculine energy. It's not a good version of it. It's a wounded version of it. But taking the feminine energy, the other side of it, which I'll describe, and saying this is bad, wrong, and demonizing it. And so before I go any further with that, the way I think about the masculine and feminine energy is, first of all, we all have it in us. So if you're listening to this and you don't like the terms because of what it may have, the connotation, it's not male or female. It's literally a fluid energy that we all have in different quantities that adjusts and ebbs and flows based on the situations we're in. Yes. And just who we are. And so there is no right or wrong or good or bad. It's all neutral. They're just aspects, just like shadow and light. Like we have the shadows, we have our darkness, we all have the light. The best way that I've heard this described that really made sense to me, like on an esoteric level, is the feminine is life force itself. Mm-hmm. It is actually like our life force. It is creation energy. And the masculine is the consciousness and the container that holds it and gives it form. Because the feminine, that's always moving and changing, that ebbs and flows, it's very cyclical, without the container, would just explode out into a million pieces and it would just kind of keep going. Mm-hmm. So the masculine energy is a container that can expand and can shift to hold the amount of feminine energy that is there. So if you think about that within yourself, imagine your physical body is the container. Yeah. Not really, but how much space you hold for yourself is the masculine. And then your feminine is how much you express yourself and how that energy flows through you and how much you allow of that truth. So that's soul. Whereas the masculine is consciousness. But a great way to think about it is the atmosphere and the weather. So the feminine is the weather. It's windy. There's sunny, calm days. There's hurricanes. There's monsoons. There's all tornadoes. And the atmosphere, its only job is to hold. It holds.
Gotcha.
It doesn't tell the weather you only get to be sunny and calm. Mm-hmm. Like it just holds. And the way in which we come back to sort of this healthy, what people would call like divine polarity maybe, or the divine marriage between the two, both within ourselves, but then also in our relationships, is through holding space for both being vital parts. Because without the atmosphere, I don't know what the hell would happen to us. We wouldn't be here, right? But also without the weather, what would life look like without that? And that's, so when you think about within yourself doing this healing work, how well do you trust your container, your consciousness, to hold the space for the immensity, for the like infinite power source, creativity, expression that is the feminine energy? Okay. So, and how you relate to that within yourself directly impacts how well you can hold space in the presence of somebody else's creation, somebody else's expression, somebody else's, and it requires work with both sides because of history then. So bringing in the ancestral and the karmic, if you believe in that, not everybody does. I do. These experiences that we've had or that are in our DNA, that our family line has had, have been from this dynamic that we've accepted as the way it is, mm-hmm. that men are the protectors and the providers, and they're better somehow, like on some level, like the historic narrative of, and women are only safe under a man. Yeah. Right. You think about the witch wounds that people talk about a lot now, the demonization of the feminine energy as bad or destructive. Now, the feminine can absolutely be destructive. We have to revere it for what it is. It's pure power. Yeah. But when we demonized and we started, stringing women to pyres and lighting them on fire for being healers, to help with this smear campaign to allow the single God religions to have men, you know, and this idea of power control being held.
Yeah.
What imprint has that had on all of us? That to be intuitive and to heal and to use nature as our medicine and all of this might get your ass strung up and burned.
Yeah.
It might get your babies taken away from you. It might get you murdered. If you don't comply in your household or whatever, you're not safe. It's okay that he beats you. His desire is the only thing that matters. So I'm not saying this to knock men. I'm saying we're all hurt by these dynamics that have played out, that really we haven't unwound ourselves from fully. It's more subtle in a lot of ways now, but we're all hurt by it, because what it's done is it's set up this dynamic of what men are supposed to look like and what women are supposed to look like and what we have to do to be safe enough, loved, connected, whatever. And it's not really authentic to the wholeness of like ourselves as a sovereign being. And so when you're working with a man who's dealing with like so many men I know, dealing with the struggle of, they know there's more to them than just what needs to be, you know, like what they've been told, or the way they've been shamed in the locker room, or the way they've been shamed in all these other places in their life for all the different things. They may know that there's something off about that, but to face that and recognize like how much that's actually hurt them, and face and feel the shame of maybe the first time they got a boner in the locker room, or like in front of a girl and somebody pointed at them and like, ha ha ha, ha, or the first time somebody told them they were going to hell for masturbating, or the first time that they felt love and got rejected and somebody told them to suck it up and deal with it, or the first, you know, or first time one of their parents beat them for crying when they wanted something when they were 5 years old, right? Those things leave marks. And if we're not willing to face and like acknowledge and feel them now, the vulnerability of feeling maybe how angry they feel about that and holding space for their anger, then they never fully liberate themselves from these stories and these narratives to actually settle into themselves. Because what I see is, and I've experienced this like in the different iterations of dating over the years, who I attracted in was in direct correlation to where I was. And, you know, I've had some lovely people, some lovely men that have come into my space, and I've had some not so lovely men that have come into my space. And there's lessons I took from all of that. But what I've seen in my current partner, for instance, like he's done a lot of work around all these narratives that never quite felt right to him. But he had to have the courage to just stand in it. And one of the most attractive things about him is how present he is. And he can be so present with me in that container of consciousness. And he can hold me when I am raging out because I'm processing through and I mean, like when I talk about raging out, I mean like I am crying, coughing, yelling, not at him, but I'm just processing the energy of these emotions that are coming through me that have been unprocessed for many, many years or many, many lifetimes, whatever it is. And he can just hold it and say, let it out, babe. Cry, keep going. I've got you. And literally just stand there and do nothing else but that. Doesn't try to fix it, doesn't try to, and then I can do the same for him in return. When he's having something that he's dealing with, I can hold that space for him because I've done the work to be comfortable enough to notice when, because it used to happen. Like I've always been cool with big emotions, you know that. Like I'm always, I have a lot of men that have come into my life that are like, that they tell me things or they acknowledge things that they never, but because they know that I'm not going to judge them for it, because I think it's actually really courageous and really beautiful. But I've had to do work around noticing when I do go into like, ew, when somebody's having an emotion. But I also realize that there is some nuance to it. When I talked about that manipulation part, there's a difference between a man who is connected with himself and having an authentic expression of energy moving, whether that be through anger, whether that be through crying, whether that be through whatever it is, but he's holding it for himself. He's not projecting it onto me or trying to make me responsible for it.
Yes.
There's something really beautiful and like powerful in witnessing that, like that true authentic expression, and allowing that, like them allowing me to hold them in that, versus somebody who has an emotional reaction that they're projecting out because they're sort of like they've reached the lid and it's about to blow off. So they have to like blow off a little steam, and they might have this reaction, but there's not taking any responsibility for it as theirs.
Well, it's like they're getting close to it, like to it being them, and they're getting closer to who they are, and they have to create a buffer again because now they're too close, and so they're having an actual reaction to it. I mean, I just dealt with this literally the day before yesterday, where I called someone out just like point blank. I was like, hey, stop hurting women. And he was like, you don't know what the F you, blah, blah, blah. And like, but it's like, dude, I know, I like, yeah, no, I know you. Like, I know you. Like, you were broken by your first wife. You have been angry at her. You have gone through now 2 more marriages where you hurt both of those women by cheating. Like, you, like, I mean, it's like very clear, you know, like, but like his reaction is never to himself. His reaction is always, and I should preface that I didn't just like roll up on him and was like, like we've talked about this a ton. And but he just is just like, dude, like just get out of your own way. Like you are still allowed to have a good life where you have a great relationship with someone, but you can't, like, don't keep doing the cycle, because the problem with that site, and I posted about it, the problem with your cycle by not being with yourself in how you feel and what's real and your roots of your issues, is that you then hurt other people, and you're causing issue that you're then just causing roots into other people. And that's not cool, you know. The thing that, like, when you were talking, I was thinking about how when I decided to go fully into opportunity coaching, I just assumed that my verbiage, when I posted those things, would naturally attract more women, because I'm like, well, women are more in tune with their, like, you know, trauma and like recovery and like self-love and blah blah blah. But then I received more men who were reaching out to me, um, and asking to work with me, and I was really surprised. And I'm pleasantly surprised, but I did have to do some work with myself first, because I have been single long enough and have been hurt by enough guys that I do have a bias where if a guy comes to me and he's like, sometimes I feel like, you know, women don't see me. I'm like, oh, did women not see you? Okay, like, that's so sad, you know, like, but then I was like, Sarah, this is valid. And like, you need to check yourself. And it's actually been a lot of work for me to be able to recognize, like, yes, as a woman, have I been assaulted, cheated on, verbally abused, all of these things, right? At the hands of men, I have had a lot of trauma. However, a lot of men have had a lot of trauma too. Like, my trauma does not negate their trauma or supersede theirs. And I'm a really big proponent. The more that I just check myself and work through my own biases, the more I realize, like, if let's say a goal of mine is to provide a safer space for me and other women and children and whatever, ultimately a more self-aware and healthy man is a safer world. And I think a healthier and more self-aware man also creates a more growth-focused world for children, because we're not so consumed as adults that we can't see how to show up or check our own things that we take from our childhood and place it onto our kids, right? And but yeah, and so like it took work for me too, because it wasn't the like, oh, a guy's crying, that's so weak. It was the like, what are you crying about? You know, like, and
it's the trauma comparing kind of thing. It's like,
yes.
yeah. And I, you know, I've had to deal with that on different levels, mostly though within like my own relationship, because I had to get honest, and what you're describing sounds a lot like, I mean, especially like the experiential astrology work that I do. The guy who did my training, he talks a lot about like part of so much of our training is us doing our own healing work, getting in the circle, experiencing, noticing where we're really triggered and what like, you know, sticky points we still have, so that when we're holding space for somebody else and we're meant to be, it's their experience, we can like notice ourselves getting triggered, but then put that aside so that we're not, again, bringing our stuff into somebody else's experience. And that's really important. And it's a lesson that I learned. I'm so grateful for a mentor of mine, Douglas Heel, who I did a couple trainings with. And he does such a beautiful job of like unapologetically creating a safe container, but constantly constantly reminding us throughout, as we're doing this very vulnerable hands-on work where people are having experiences, they're experiencing sometimes their body in a new way. Once they get on the table, have an intervention, they get off and they're like having the experience. And one of the things he constantly reminds us of is like, when somebody gets off the table, you don't say a word. You let them, don't yell out what you see or what you notice. Allow them to have their experience. Yeah. It's not about you. And so often like that lesson translates into life about how quickly we will, because that's how we interact. We're triggered by something, we notice something, we create a story about it. And then all of a sudden we're the main character in it when our job is to hold space for somebody else, that's not really appropriate at that time. And it doesn't serve. So that's, you know, something that I had to practice. And even like mid-session, if I find myself floating or getting like, a lot of times I'll have clients who have similar things that I've worked through, which is a beautiful benefit, because I can really truly be empathetic to what they're experiencing, but also then not going into my own dramas around it, is just noticing it lovingly and pulling back and being like, this is about them. Allow them to have their experience. That's the most empowering thing I can do. But then in my relationship, this actually came up pretty recently, because I've been doing a lot of deep work since probably since 2017, when a relationship with somebody who shall not be named, who you knew.
Well, and I don't want to interrupt you. However, this does bring me, because we may not have been in contact continuously. However, I have followed a lot of like your journey, and I have over the years been like, oh, I may not even know Nicolette anymore. Like, she used to be this like, you know, I don't know, just normal human person, I guess. And then now she's like, you know, flowing in the wind and like oceans and whatever, you know. But I know that it feels as if what I have seen, there was a pivotal therapy session that you did. I believe you're overseas, and I'm going to just like butcher all this, but it seems like the type of therapy was where you did like kind of like the like maybe like stomping and like chanting and like crying, and I don't know what that's called. And that also may not be the pivotal moment, but I really am kind of curious, what was your transformation? And I don't mean that in a like you stopped being a complete different person, but like how did you evolve from where you were to where you are?
Yeah, so there's multiple layers, and I've thought a lot about like what was the first part of it, like what was the first step of like really transitioning into that journey. And so like quick backstory for those who haven't known me for 20 years almost, is I was always an athlete. I was a multi-sport athlete in high school. I played volleyball with Sarah at George Mason, 4-year, player. And then I got out of college and I had a psychology degree, which you can't do shit with, a bachelor's in psychology. And I didn't know what to do. And over the next 10 years, like I got into a relationship really soon. I got married really soon, which really surprised a lot of people, I think, who had known me. And I thought I knew myself. I think that's what I told myself, but really I was terrified. And so I made a lot of decisions out of fear. I did corporate for 10 years. And then I left in 2016. But what really kickstarted my journey was when the relationship I was just about to talk about, or that I mentioned, ended. And my intuition knew that I had ignored for on and off for 3.5 years and had been through an immense amount of trauma with this person. It just abruptly ended. And I was like, absolutely done. And I realized that while I was absolutely done, I was also numb, because I had to shut myself off for many reasons that I won't go into, just to stay with that person, just to keep going. And what I realized subsequently, the first big aha moment was at the training with Douglas Heel, when he called me out in front of a group of people and helped me to notice that I was showing this, like, I have it all together mask and telling a bunch of stories to connect, but it wasn't really like, he called it monologuing. It wasn't really like what was relevant. And it's because I couldn't touch that. And then when I did the interventions throughout that weekend, like him working on my jaw, especially, that released all this emotion, it made me realize that I had been spinning in this like low grade stress, hypervigilance mode for probably most of my life. And I didn't even, like, I felt relaxed for the first time, but it felt like I was sedated for like almost 12 hours. Like I was just like, if this is what relaxed is, I've never known this before. Like what the actual like F is going on.
Yeah.
So then I went on a retreat that did more opening up, that really like helped me. Pieces started falling into place. And what you're referring to, I believe, is when I went to Europe in 2018 for a couple of months. And the first real stop was Berlin, where I did this crazy ass meditation for 21 days and a really intense workshop at the end of it called Tantric Energetics. And it was about basically relating sexuality and like self stuff. And I had the most intense energetic opening that I'd ever had doing a meditation, kind of at the peak of all of this. And emotions started pouring out that I didn't know. Sounds started pouring out of me that like sounded primal. They sounded like babies crying. They sounded like women who had lost babies. It sounded, and it just kept coming and coming and coming and coming and coming for like most of the rest of the evening. I would stop and then I'd start hysterically crying again. Like I could barely make it home to the flat I was staying at. And it was the first time that the dam had broken open and my control mechanisms couldn't shut it back off. And so I had already done a good amount of work up to that point, but then a relationship ended like that night also, which was a whole extra just little like, let's add some gasoline on top of this fire that's already burning.
Of course.
And but it really set me on a path into the depths, into what many people would call the underworld, they would call the darkness, not in a bad way, but just into the depths of my being, to really uncover what I had been hiding all along, that I'm still working to uncover, which is like the reclamation of both like my connection to my body, to source, to nature, to everything and all. But what I've had to go through, which is just my soul's unique expression, I have my experiences that I needed to have to catalyze these things, these tension points. So I had the trauma from that relationship with somebody who was emotionally and sexually abusive and manipulative and just not right, to awaken something in me. And it doesn't excuse the behavior, but it helped me to realize how lost I actually was, that I was like, what am I actually doing?
Yeah. No, so I was just going to say that one thing that is hard for people sometimes to grasp is that when we work with a specific situation, it's not excusing it. Because whenever I ask them, okay, why were you in that relationship? People naturally take it as, well, I'm the one at fault. And it's like, no. Like, because there's a reason that you were in that space where that person was attracted to you, or that you allowed it to happen or whatever. And it's not your fault. Because you didn't know why. Like, it's the same way that I didn't know for a long time. I just kept attracting men who were emotionally distant and closed down. And I would keep being like, what's going on? What's going on? And when I look at those relationships, I'm like, well, why did I stay with that person for so long? Like I needed to stop shaming myself, but I also needed to ensure that I'm not going there again. There's a reason Sarah is attracting that person. There's a reason why Sarah is allowing herself to be treated that way. And it's because of how Sarah sees herself, like, and it is like, I think, like, I love everything that you are talking about. And we're going to have to do like a part 2, because I feel like we could go on and on and on. I'm curious, what is one thing that, like, if you have someone who's like, yo, I'm thinking about working with you, but I'm not quite sure if I'm ready. Um, like what would you tell them? What is something that you would be like, hey, like, check in with yourself on this. Have some conversations about this with yourself, and depending on where you're at, then let's talk. Like, what would you say?
So I'm going to answer that question, but I'd like to touch on what you just said really quickly.
Yeah.
About the absolutely not shaming somebody for the experiences, because there's a difference between actions that other people have done and then what we do in response to that. And there's a lot of different reasons for why we do what we do, for why we show up the way we do, why we stay in relationships. And I'll never forget, there's 2 things about my journey with this, because a lot of my karmic stuff, I think, is around relationships. A lot of my life work here is learning relationships. So it's been sort of like my earth school, like, curriculum.
Yeah.
And the first was when I was in Berlin, or one of them was when I was in Berlin, and one of my dear friend Mino we were staying in a flat together doing this meditation together. And he was the first person I sat down and told the whole story of that relationship to. And he was looking at me at the end, like, as I was explaining some things, and he's like, Nick, that's not okay. And I'm like, but I allowed this and this. And he's like, no, that's not okay. Like, that's coercion. Like, that's sexual assault. And I was like, no, and so much has been hard for me to just acknowledge the behaviors that happened and not justifying them away, because I can't, because I can see the love and the good and also the wounding in people and excuse it almost, or I used to a lot more. And I had to learn the difference between, like, there are, like, I believe truly that, like, everybody is worthy of love, and I believe people are doing the best that they can.
Yes.
That doesn't mean, though, that I have to allow those people in my space, and that's boundaries. And that allows me to maintain my compassion. It also, though, then I had to learn how to stop taking full responsibility for everything. I take responsibility for how I showed up and how I responded, even from the wounded place that I didn't realize that I was responding in a way, like, that relationship was so much, and everything that led up to it was punishment for me leaving my husband because I felt guilty.
Yes.
And it set this whole thing in motion about worthiness and, being broken and all this stuff. And so I allowed certain things. Now, what he did was not okay at all.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but part of a lot of this is taking responsibility for our own part in it without shaming it, without blaming it, without judging ourselves so harshly, because if we had known better, we would have done better. If we had the tools, if we had the awareness, if we felt like we could leave. And the other thing that really hit me was when I was watching an episode of Grey's Anatomy years ago. I was coaching at a tournament one weekend. It was like I was rewatching, and there was a woman who had been physically assaulted by her partner, and she was a lawyer or something like that. And then there's this monologue or this dialogue that happened with her and one of the doctors, where she was like, I'm a smart, educated, successful woman, and, like, how did I let this happen to me? Like, because the guy had beat her up like really badly. And I heard that and I was like, because that's the thing. It's like, I am very smart. I am very aware. I'm very conscious of a lot of things, and I have a really strong intuition. How did I allow this person to worm their way into my life? And it's because that's where I was in my journey at that point in time.
The only reason why I laughed is because when you were talking about your ability to control your emotions during your 21-day lessons. I don't know if that's the right word, but I was thinking about how I watched a Grey's Anatomy episode where a woman had been raped, and she like kept flinching when like men, so they lined the halls with women.
Yes. Oh my
And
God.
I've watched that episode multiple times, and then I was watching it 2 years ago, and I just started bawling, and I was like, "What is happening?" And it was because like I was assaulted twice, right? Like before I went to college and when I first got to college, and I kept being like, "Well, you know what? It was my fault because I shouldn't have been drinking, and like it was my fault because I should have fought against him harder. So whatever." And then for years, I kept being like, I mean, I'm not over here complaining about how I was raped. Like, get over it, people. And I had to suddenly, like, it just like hit me where I like just kept being I think it wasn't my fault. And I joke because it was really, really powerful, but then I couldn't stop crying. So I'm like, I like took Joe out and I'm just like, I'm like brushing my teeth and I'm like, oh, for heaven's sake, Sarah. Like, but I was like, I mean, we're just crying tonight, but no, I didn't mean to like cut you off. It's just like when you were saying it.
But that right there, like that, those things that open those dams in us, like that's like, if you'd probably call it God moments, but those are the moments where we start to crack ourselves open and start letting out all the crap that we have been storing and holding on to for dear life we think to protect ourselves from it happening again, or from being vulnerable or weak or exposed or whatever it is. But all it does is just, it wastes our energy. It makes us sick. It makes us sick in physical and emotional ways. And it makes us guarded. And then what we can't then touch is the true connection we really want to have with ourselves and the world. And so, you know, it's something, I feel like there's some beautiful grace when something like that triggers. I don't question anymore. I just allow myself to go with it. That's part of my practice, is allowing myself just to get messy as much as I need to, because it's just energy that wants to move, and it's showing up for me right now in this moment, because it's asking me to pay attention. It's asking for me to honor it, to witness it, to be curious about it, and have the courage to follow that thread as to where it's leading me. And go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I like to think about it in terms of like, who would we be and how would we show up if we took off all the labels that other people in the world placed on us since we were young, you know? We'd be a lot different, a lot more open, a lot more trusting, a lot more loving. So we only have a few minutes left. So I definitely want to hear, what is the one tidbit that you would share?
I remember the question. So what I say to people is, after I explain what it is that I do, because I can't describe exactly how it's going to go, because it's different every single time, every single person, because it's whatever wants to show up. It's whatever the body wants to express. It's whatever energy is there. I tell them that if it's a yes, like what I want more than anything else is for them to honor their true yeses and nos. And what that looks like, the best way I can describe it is like that something's a yes, even if it's like oh fuck, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
But it's still a yes, because like I have clients all the time. I had somebody who I messaged and I'm like, I'm really excited. Like, they've scheduled an appointment for me. They've been talking about it for a while. They scheduled with me and I was like, I'm really excited to finally get to work with you. And she's like, oh, I'm scared. I was like, that's perfect. That's fine. Yeah. And because what our soul is calling for us, what our self is calling for us, what our emotional, like what our truth wants, is oftentimes not going to be comfortable. It's going to feel exposed. It's uncharted territory for most people. And so it's really easy to talk ourselves out of, or to be like, well, I'm scared, so it's a no. Mm-hmm. A yes doesn't always mean like, yay, I'm so excited for this. sometimes, like most of the time for me, it's like the 21 days of the dynamic meditation that I did in Berlin. I hate that meditation on many levels, but I knew something in me, like it came into my consciousness. Some other friends of mine were going to do this, and I was like looking for where to go. And I was like, yes, I signed up for it. I paid for it. I didn't think about it until like 2 days before, when I was already in Berlin and I couldn't leave. And I'm like, because there was so much resistance in me to do it, because I knew something was going to happen. So I tell people, just honor that. But if it's a no, even because we're never going to be ready to be opened in certain ways, right? It's never comfortable to do this. Now it's liberating, and it's powerful, and it's really beautiful, but it's not always going to be something that you're like looking forward to. And so, but if it's a no, then it's a no. And that's okay too. Like, because if more people, I believe, were able to truly honor and communicate their yeses and nos, like if it's a no right now, because it just feels like too much, then it's a no.
Yeah, it's valid.
And if it's ever time, then I'm here, because my ego is not attached to you signing up. What I want is for you to be able to walk out in this world. And if somebody asks you to do something that is a no for you, that you can say no, and not like go into like this tumbling down a hill of, oh my God, I'm the worst,
needing to explain, like,
or just bad. Like, because we're so often so attached to being good and right, that it's at the betrayal and sacrifice of like what we truly need and want. And then we end up just hurting ourselves worse, because we're doing things to please other people as opposed to like truly honor ourselves.
So before we wrap up, I always like to ask 2 questions. What is one way that you desire to better show up for yourself?
And this just came up over the weekend. So one of the things that I've had reflected back to me a lot, that I felt a disconnect with, especially over the past 2 years, is like how loving I am, and how much space I hold and all of that. But one of the things that I'm realizing as I get deeper and deeper is that I have really been guarding my heart. I have been sort of like, I've been there and I could still hold space. But I haven't been able to reconnect within my own self and with the world in a way that feels nourishing and feels like I used to just love hugging people. And I've noticed there's a guard that I have. So how I would like to be able to show up more fully is being more fully myself and taking up more space and speaking what is true for me, coming from that place where I am not stockpiling, withholding love.
I like that.
Because what is love for me is a lot.
Yeah.
It's not like putting it on somebody, but it's actually like allowing myself to emanate and open it so that people can just be in the presence of it, because that is part of what I'm here to be.
Yeah.
But I've had such a fear of people taking from me, and I've been so exhausted by how much I have given and leaked out, that I've guarded it. So that's where like really just opening and being more fully like me, without the fear of people manipulating and twisting it into some like ill intention, or like, oh, you're too much, or whatever it is. Yeah.
And what is one way you desire to better show up for others?
I think it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Because
I can see that.
Me settling into and being more me just invites the space for people to be more themselves. So I think it as within, so without, like, it's what I see as a reflection in my world has so much to do with what is coming up within me. So I think the more that I am me, the more that I can serve and really help people drop into the spaces that they're being called to go into and heal and move.
I like that. I love it. What do you have anything coming up or that you would like to discuss really fast before you go? Or do you just want to share your info so that people can find you?
Yeah, so I don't really have anything specific happening. I've just reopened my books up since I moved to Richmond. So I live in Richmond, Virginia. I work primarily in person, though I can do virtual. So if anybody's interested in the services that I offer, or I write, and I also, I'm a new venture is I'm doing more art. Part of it was stemmed from the experiential astrology. So it's digital collage work.
Yeah.
And I'll share some of it with you if you haven't seen it. So
Yeah,
I have my website right now for everything is nicolettebernardes.com, which you can spell that in the thing.
I will put it. Yeah.
Perfect. And then my 2 Instagram handles are at Relentlessly Authentic. That's where a lot of my writing, and I've been for a while now. And then also I just started a new page, Soul Filled Space, which is actually my business name now. And yep, I just transitioned at the beginning of this year because it felt more true to me. And that's where I'm sharing more of my artwork and probably some other just more aesthetic, colors and textures and things about evoking feeling and that safe, soft, expansive, wild space that I like to invite people into. So giving them kind of a visual version of that. So I'm going to be starting to share my art and sell my art sooner rather than later. So that's been a newer venture for me. But people can find me in either of those platforms. My website or Instagram are the 2 main places that they live. And I also have my podcast at Relentlessly Authentic Radio that
I don't know if you noticed, but I am wearing your shirt.
I noticed this the second we got on. I was like, my girl representing.
I know. I was like, I'm gonna have to wear her shirt for her interview. I'm very excited. So no, thank you so much for showing up for this conversation, sharing so much of what you do or your thoughts. I know that I can think of a few people already that will probably just really enjoy what we talked about. So thank you very much. And I'm excited to stay connected and to see your work. And maybe we can do like a part 2 and, but no, thank you. And thank you.
Oh, well, my reflection back is I love you. And I'm just so, it's funny to look back on. I mean, like in a lot of ways, you were like my child / little sister in college. And it's been really fun to both get to know you as an adult and us be able to be there for each other at different points, but then also from afar, watch you continue to evolve and to deepen into yourself and shift and heal. And so just keep going. I'm proud of you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that so much. I appreciate you. I will put all of your links so that if you are interested in working with Nicolette, you'll be able to quickly be able to peruse her site, get a feel for her. I strongly suggest that if you are someone who is aware, either before this conversation or while listening through this conversation, if you're aware that a lot of things resonate with you and that you have some trauma that you need to let go of, please, because there is the really unfortunate thing is that there is enough trauma and healing and recovery to go around. So I do not lose any benefit. I only gain as a human person on this planet if you go and you work with Nicolette. So have a good day and thank you.
Thank you for having me. I'm just, this is fun. So thank you.